The last chapter, Chapter 18, The Treasure. "Let me go! Let me go!" the man shouted. He flung his arms about and kicked his feet, but the children hung on. "You're not going to get away from us, Bo Stenkel," Pete cried out. At this, the man looked startled. How did these children know his name? By this time, Officer Cal came running from the barn and collared the thief. "That's enough out of you," he said. "Bo Stenkel, you're under arrest." The man offered no resistance to the policeman, knowing it was hopeless. Cal thanked the children for capturing him. "You did better than the entire Shoreham Police Department," he praised them. Then, turning to Bo Stenkel, he added, "As for you, I have a few questions." Bo was trembling. He did not want to go to jail. He told Officer Cal he would confess everything. Before he could say any more, they heard shouts from across the field. "It's Mother!" Pam exclaimed. "And Holly and Sue!" With them was another policeman. Mrs. Hollister were happy to see that her 3 children were safe. She threw her arms around Pam and then hugged the 2 boys. "I'm so proud of you," she exclaimed upon seeing that Bo Stenkel had been captured. "They're real heroes," Cal agreed. "I hope you weren't frightened by their absence, Mrs. Hollister." "I was worried," she replied. "When I arrived home, Mrs. Hunter told me she had seen you all leave suddenly in a police car. I couldn't understand what happened, so I phoned headquarters. I called Dad, too. He ought to be here soon." Just as she said this, Mr. Hollister came hurrying toward them. Quickly, the children told him the story of the capture of Bo Stenkel. "He's going to make a confession," Officer Cal said. "Let's hear it, Stenkel." The prisoner hung his head in shame. He said he had been living on Blackberry Island. While on his way to Stony Point one day, he had spied the small van by the side of the road with no one in it. Since he needed money, Bo had robbed the van. He had sold some of the toys and the sprinkler, but the rest of the things were in the barn. "The suitcase too?" Mr. Hollister asked. "Yes." "Show me." Bo led them into the barn. He had hid the suitcase in a corner of a horse stall. Mr. Hollister quickly opened it. Everything was still inside. "Thank goodness," he said. Meanwhile, Holly and Sue had found their toys. Holly began to play her piano, and Sue was hugging 3 dolls at once. "Daddy," Pete said, walking up to his father, "there's something we ought to ask Bo. What about the treasure at our house?" At first, Bo Stenkel would not answer. "Go on, speak up," Officer Cal urged. "You're in enough trouble now. You'd better come clean." "All right," the prisoner said finally. "I'll tell you everything I know." The thief related how he had heard the story of the treasure hidden in the Hollisters' home. He had searched the place before the family had moved in, but had found nothing. Then the day before the Hollisters arrived, he had discovered that certain bricks in the cellar at the bottom of the chimney looked newer than the others. He was sure the treasure was hidden behind them, but before he could pry the bricks loose, the big van had come. Bo Stenkel had fled toward Stony Point. It was then that he had seen the little van and robbed it while the movers were off taking a swim. Hearing them say the Hollisters would not arrive until later, Bo had gone back looking for the treasure, but again had not found it. "But why were you in our attic when we moved in?" Pete asked. Bo said it was because of Zip. The dog had been such a good watchdog running around outside the house that the man could not escape. When someone had started down to the cellar, Bo had scooted up the secret stairway about which he knew. When Pete and Pam came to the attic, Bo had hurried back to the cellar and escaped out the window. By this time, Zip was in the house. "But you kept entering our house, trying to tear out the bricks in the fireplace, didn't you?" Mr. Hollister asked him. Bo admitted that he had, but something had frightened him off every time. Then, when the children had found the clues on Blackberry Island, Bo said he realized he must act quickly. "I decided to tear apart those bricks the first time I saw that nobody was home." "Did you find the treasure when you got the bricks loose?" Pam asked. The man shook his head, but there was a suspicious glint in his eye. "Are you sure you didn't find it?" the policeman asked sternly. Pete was watching the man carefully and noticed that when Bo shook his head again, he cast a quick glance toward the hayloft. "I don't think he's telling the truth, Officer Cal," Pete said. "I have a hunch he did find the treasure, and he hid it somewhere in this barn. I'm going to search for it." When Bo heard this, he tussled in an effort to get away from Officer Cal, but the policeman held him tightly. "I think Pete's hunch is going to come true," Cal said. Pete hurried inside and up a rickety old stairway to the loft. He decided to look first among the bales of hay near the window where the man had jumped out. It was hard work moving the bales, and the dusty hay made him sneeze as he searched. Pete found an old oil lamp and a broken piece of harness. Golly, he thought, if Bo hid the treasure, he certainly found a secret spot for it. But the boy continued to search, reaching his hands way under each heavy bale of hay. Finally, his hands touched something hard. It was a box, which Pete quickly uncovered and carried downstairs. Bo's eyes popped wide open when he saw it. "I think this is the treasure," Pete said excitedly, handing the box to his father. With everybody looking on, Mr. Hollister opened it. Inside were bundles of $5, $10, and $20 bills. "That's a fortune," Officer Cal said in amazement. "No wonder Bo denied finding it. He wanted to come back sometime and get it for himself." "And now it's all ours," Ricky piped up. "I'm afraid not, son," his father said. "This doesn't belong to us. It is the property of the former owner who hid it." "The nice old man who doesn't walk in his sleep after all?" said Holly, and the others laughed. "We shall return the money to him," Mrs. Hollister said. "It will be a nice surprise for him, I'm sure." Officer Cal smiled. "I can see why people call you the Happy Hollisters. You make other people happy as well as being happy yourselves. And another thing," Cal said. "You children have solved my first big mystery for me. Thank you. Maybe I'll get a promotion." He said goodbye and led Bo Stenkel back across the field where the police cars were parked. The Hollisters followed and climbed into their station wagon. As they drove home, the children began to sing. Everybody was gay and excited. This had been their first big adventure in Shoreham. They had solved the mystery of their new home. Little Sue, who had looked on wide-eyed when the treasure had been found, now spoke up. "It was such fun today," she said. "Can we do the same tomorrow?" "Swell," Ricky replied. "I'll help you find another adventure."